listening to the Coalmine Canary. Warning: side effects may cause cognitive dissonance.
Okay, so we're back. This is video 2. Hopefully you made it through video 1. It was an hour and a half long, a lot of history, bringing a lot of different topics into the foundation of the shadow government in the United States. Now, again, what I was saying in the last video is you can't, just like I said in the other video, the Bernie Sanders series, you really can't take AI on the surface, because it's only going to pull within a few seconds what it can scrape from the web related to the topic on the surface. There's no depth of knowledge. So you can't take its initial response as commandment, okay? So my question was, then, after we found out about all this ESSA and all this funding and the infrastructure that was instituted, my next question was, because we didn't teach homosexuality in schools. We didn't teach trans and we didn't teach sexuality to preschoolers and third graders and all this kind of stuff. And none of that stuff was in school libraries. Until when? Until something shifted. And it was fairly recent. So my natural question was, is that where schools began getting money for LGBTQIA, gay, and trans materials into school libraries and hiring LGBT educators and building out programs and so forth and so on, right? In colleges and universities, these gender studies and all that kind of stuff. Well, AI said, no, that is not where or how those specific library materials or hiring practices began. And here's where the rubber hits the road. They couldn't do directly. Okay, now I want you to go back and I want you to think and read it clearly. According to policy analysts at Education Next, this strategy allowed the administrator to successfully bypass Congress. I'm going to tell you, it gets worse than bypassing Congress. They created a system through USAID and NGOs, and I'm going to get to it in a second, and that's where we're headed, okay? To bypass the whole constitutional republic of American governance. That's why it's a shadow government. They have literally bypassed every facet and aspect of government to implement and do what they're doing with DSA, Democratic Socialist America, with the Democrat Party, the DNC, and Democrats themselves. That's what open borders was all about. It is literally the population of the shadow government in America. And then the PSYOP is getting people who are still part of the American governance system to side with and cheer and root for and riot for the shadow government. And if you think that there's not an actual physical war coming, you're insane. You're insane. If you believe that everything's just going to work out and be okay, you're insane. I'm going to show you why. And I'm not saying, again, this is all in the context, because AI could be wrong. It could have led me down a wrong rabbit hole. It could be totally off. And I try to tie it to as much current events and recent history as I can, because it helps me determine personally my opinion that some of this that AI is telling me has legitimacy. Now, because I printed this out, I can't show you the actual links and stuff that it used to grab the information that's regurgitating to me from sources on the web. But I'm just recalling things from my own mind and knowledge about current events and stuff that's been going on in our country to substantiate some of these claims. All right, so how did all these materials get into these libraries, and how did all these programs at college and university begin? No, that's not where. It didn't come from those funds. The Race to the Top initiative in the American Recovery and ARA of 2009 did not contain provisions. Of course not. Because you know why it didn't contain them written in them? But see, that's what here's the bypass. So they had here's the chess game. It couldn't be written into it. And therefore funds from it could not be distributed for that specific reason directly. And that's the key. Directly. It couldn't be stated openly. Because 98% of American population, 95%, or maybe they're 10% of the population. 90% of the population would be like, nah, not going to support that. Okay, so no. So that's why AI is saying no, because again, it's only on the surface, right? AI doesn't reason. It's algorithmic. It calculates 1 + 1 is 2. That's it. It doesn't reason. Okay, so anyway, where the money and decisions actually come from, the president's value material in school libraries now here we go, are governed by different mechanisms. Okay, well, what are those mechanisms? Local and state control. Again, this is surface. So local and state has control over it. The librarians, the state school boards. Do you think this is where all of the criminalization of parents going to school boards opposing the influx of these materials at those times? They were out there winning elections for school boards while the giant was asleep, while Americans were asleep. They trusted too much. They slept too securely. And the shadow government and forces outside of this country who raised Obama to be who he is, from Kenya to Harvard to president. They groomed him. And the Ilhan Omar and her father. From Somalia to Kenya to Minnesota. This is the infrastructure. They were winning. Apparently, I'm just saying, I'm reverse engineering all this as I go along. It's the only thing that makes sense, looking back, step by step. So, people were making local decisions who were aligned with scientific socialism, democratic socialism, DNC, Obama policies, unspoken, not their popularized policies, the things that they preached from the pulpit, okay, which they created. Don't forget, in the first video, I establish how that was created. That's a fact. That's a fact. The decline of the black population can be traced back to LBJ and the Welfare Acts. All of the divorce-related acts, child support, all of those welfare acts. There's a whole gamut of them. That was the laws of the shadow government. Anything that's DEI, anything that's equity instead of equality, equal under God, one nation under God. Anything that's opposite of that, a tangent from that, obtuse from, that's all shadow. It's all shadow government. The word democracy. We're a democracy, a democracy, a democracy. Yes, the shadow government is a democracy because that's what scientific socialism practices as voting and governance. That's democracy. Mob rules. The people in power make the laws by the pen because they're in power. Might makes right. All of that is communism. All of that is democracy. What do you think? It wasn't a totalitarian dictatorship in Russia. They had elections. They were fraudulent. They were fraudulent, just like what they attempted to do here in the United States through Dominion. Now that all that's come out. So all we're doing is reverse engineering. They were winning school board elections. They were winning local elections. They were winning. That's exactly what they've been doing. Mayor Mendami. They're doing the same thing, only now it's not school boards, it's mayors and governors. Spanberger, the governor of Virginia, the governor of New Jersey, Mayor Bass, Nitya Raman, the DSA candidate. Mayor Bass is no different, though. They're the same. They literally frauded the election in real time so that Spencer Pratt couldn't become mayor. Okay? It's going on all over the country. And it began when Obama became president. That is when he didn't become president of the United States of America. I mean, he did, but he was president of the shadow government of scientific socialism, the welfare state, the communist nation on our soil, intended to supersede the Constitution of the United States. This is why so many of his appointees act like they do in the judiciary branch. They all have to go. They all have to be removed, or we're not going to exist as a country anymore. We are at war against a foreign power on our own soil. Federal Civil Rights Guidance, Title IX. Oh, God. You hear it in schools all the time. While the Obama and Biden administration used Title IX, federal law banning sex discrimination, to issue guidelines protecting LGBT. Okay, so so AI is admitting it, even though it said no above. It's admitting it through Title IX. That's how it began. To issue guidelines protecting LGBT civil rights folks, blah, 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 then distributing, protecting from discrimination and harassment. You know what? We had dudes wearing dresses. They were anarchists in our high school and stuff. This has been going on. That was in the 80s, and early 90s. And that was going on back then without Obama and Biden doing anything. So it was something intentionally and far worse under these revisions and changes and guidelines. They're not constitutional. It's not part of constitutional America. The constitutional republic form of government, the Republican form of government of a republic. Their guidelines. This is all shadow government stuff. These civil rights, it's disgusting to call them civil rights. And if you're a Black American and you're still with the DNC party, standing with them on this, and they're calling LGBTQIA equivalent to the civil rights movement of America, I don't understand. You're a traitor to your own people, because they're using this to lift up LGBTQ and all that kind of stuff to be equivalent to what you did and went through. How can you stand for that? You're a total hypocrite if you do. I mean, wake up. They're trying to destroy your legacy. They're trying to put the smoke of Oz and cover up who you are with a bunch of rainbow flags. It's disgusting. It's preposterous. These civil rights directives focused on student safety and bathroom access rather than distributing money for specific library books. Private philanthropy and nonprofits. Now, here we go. Much of the modern push for book sets in schools is driven by private grants. So the parents who oppose it were criminalized by Biden and Obama administrations and investigated by FBI. But the private grant of other families who were for it, they were received with open arms because they gave money. But where private grants have to come from organizations, okay? And non-governmental organizations. Oh my God, there we go. NGOs. And there's the bypass. I'm going to get to how the bypass works in just a second. But that's important to know. For example, programs like Rainbow Library, run by nonprofit GLSEN, provide free LGBT inclusive book sets directly to participating K-12 schools. Now we're talking about how did they win? How were they winning the war? How did they build the infrastructure? Because they brought through the Trojan horse. Inside the Trojan horse were all these officials elected locally. School boards. School boards then hired principals. And don't think it wasn't going on in Christian schools and Christian organizations all over the country as well. It's why you have the rise of LGBTQ pastors and women pastors and gay rights activists and pedophiles in the pulpit nowadays. Because same kind of philanthropy and nonprofit creation. Specific federal public health grants. Why is public health specifically for only related to LGBTQ? Somehow, is their biology? Does their heart rate? Does the cholesterol levels? Do their brains wire differently? Are they aliens? They'd have different anatomy than everybody else. Why was public health only for sexual orientation of a perverted nature, of an antichrist, anti-God, anti-tradition, anti-male, female? Everything in America was founded. Why was it only for them and not public, meaning everybody? On the federal side, funding related. So all of that's ultra vires to the Constitution of the United States. That's not how our government's set up. So this was all shadow government. And U.S. Treasury funded by U.S. taxpayers, and that's taxation without representation. Because nobody is going to say, I want my money to go towards mutilation of children's genitals, and then have to support them the rest of life with psychotherapy and drugs and everything else so they can cope with trying to live in a different body the rest of their life. Because somebody in school said that there's many genders. Because they were educated to believe that. No child believes that. No matter, I don't care what kind of propaganda they want to say, and they want to read some modern Anne Frank diaries to say, well, I thought at 3 years old, I wrote a diary that I thought I was a girl and a boy in a boy's body. You know, it's all trash. And I'm not saying Anne Frank diary's trash. I'm saying that the modern version of that, which is colored with rainbows, is trash. It's not real. It's fake. And the whole point is to get everybody to spend all their energy on this trash, so you're not spending it on getting rid of the trash. You're arguing about the kind of trash it is instead of actually standing up together and just taking out the papers in the trash. And now we get no spending cash because we haven't taken out the trash. And now America's going bankrupt. And we're all in poverty because of it. This is what the Welfare Acts did for the black community. It's what the casinos have done for so many tribes on the reservations. It's all the same. It's all the same pattern. It's all the same evil. It hasn't ever changed. It's been that way from the beginning of time, from Cain and Abel. Okay. Specific. This is not how the federal government works. The federal government doesn't work to, and this is why they had to come up with all the fictions about, well, it's a violence against me if I'm a man and I'm trans and I can't use the women's bathroom. That's violence against me. They had to come up with all this violence against people, which was all fiction and a lie, so that then they could make and create specific funds for specific groups, right? That's the lie. Okay, this is how they do. But the federal government is never ever intended to work that way. Civil rights was not just for blacks; it's for whites as well. You know, anti-discrimination laws were not just for colored people; they were for whites as well, and that's why they had to come up with a dialogue to combat and popularize narratives to combat the court cases like what was happening against Harvard and other schools who were selecting people based on the color of their skin instead of merit. Right? So anyway, okay, so this is important. This is so important to the foundation of how the shadow government operates to bypass the American Republic government, the constitutional republic government of America. They are bypassing it, and this is just the hint, but it happened by NGOs. Now we said that non-governmental organizations. Where have you heard that before? USAID, and they're connected non-governmental organizations. Now, they're going to say that they're international. That's another key. Where did those international NGOs get their money from? That's the secret sauce. That's how they bypass government. Okay? Watch. And it's all come out recently. Rand Paul did a good job of that, exposing all of that. And thank you to Rand Paul. Okay, so my next question. But we're going to get to it. It may not be this question, but we're going to get to it. So I said, but that is what ESSA did. Every Student Succeeds Act did. It sent such decisions to states without federal government scrutiny any longer. And without having to have Congress agree, right, bipartisan support to get things passed, because Republicans were and many at that time, many Democrats were not going to go for that because they knew that their constituents wouldn't go for laws like that. That you're going to give specific LGBTQ people, gay money to gay groups to promote being homosexual to your children. That just wasn't going to fly back then. So my question is now, but that's what ESSA did. It sent such decisions to the states to bypass Congress. So ESA sent it to the states that allowed NGOs, which are foreign, to be able to market LGBT-friendly materials to their elected state board members, to their elected and hired via those state education boards or school boards, librarians, teachers, etc., to be able to market those and principals. This is why the education system is so anti-American and corrupt because they put their people on boards of education institutions, and then they hired people who were not conservative. This is why if you're a conservative Christian, you're having a hard time finding a job. If you're of a certain name and background, white, you're having a hard time finding a job. And Trump's in Iran instead of America. The State Department is talking about Cuba instead of America. The State Department is going to get Maduro instead of America. Tulsi Gabbard, after she let out all that classified information of Obama, was removed. Pam Bondi, once she let out all the Epstein information, was removed. Isn't it strange that it seems like everything domestically has been halted? We can't get the Save America Act passed. John Thune is being demonized while Trump is being lifted up as a hero, but he has no influence over Thune and getting it passed. Isn't that ironic? That 3 people can hold the rest of the country hostage? Isn't that ironic? Isn't it ironic that Amy Coney Barrett has said openly that she was influenced to make the decision that she made on the birthright citizenship and another court case? Isn't it interesting that Ketanji Brown Jackson absolutely knows nothing about the Constitution and the laws of America, but yet she's on the Supreme Court? Wonder why she's there. When, Biden openly said he was going to put the first black woman on the Supreme Court. So we know that she's only there because of the color of her skin, not because of any merit. She couldn't even answer any questions in any of the Senate committee hearings. But the only reason she got appointed was because the Democrats had control of the House at the time and the Senate. And obviously people like John Thune and Tom Tillis and John Cornyn and all these a-holes, Lisa Murkowski, they're shadow government people. There's no other, if you're not changing it, you're choosing it. And Trump hasn't changed anything domestically. I'm just saying. Where is Obama in prison? Tulsi Gabbard brought it. It's all been outed. It's all in the open, in the open media. What's happened? Zero. Where's Obama? Free. Is Hillary Clinton in jail? Why is she not in jail? She was part of the Steele dossier. The spearhead of that was all fiction, a lie. It's all open. It's all out in the open. Where are these people? Free? Has anything happened to them? No. But I digress. I went down a long tangent there. I apologize. That was about 8 minutes long. I'm sorry. But let's go back. NGOs were able to market materials to youth where Congress was gridlocked. So this is how the shadow government works. NGOs. So, okay, this is the Trojan, this is the process they use to bypass the constituents of the United States and just to do whatever Obama wanted and whatever the shadow government and whoever supported him wanted. The cartels, George Soros, communist China, other entities that I haven't mentioned and I don't even know about. They're all working with him to bypass the American government. the citizens of the United States through NGOs. And by placing people in positions of power locally, the local networks, grassroots. Okay, so let's look at that. It was gridlocked by Republicans because Republicans were like, none of our constituents want any of this. To try and prevent such inappropriate liberal doctrines from causing educational declines. That was my question. Did the Rainbow Library run by the nonprofit GLSEN NGO get their funding from USAID? No. GLSENs, again, don't take that and just as God's commandment. Okay, hold up. It has to say no, right? It has to say no. GLSEN's Rainbow Library Program does not receive funding from USAID, and the ESSA was not structured to bypass Congress. Of course, it has to say this, to market LGBT materials to youth. But that's exactly what it just said up here, right? In the first video, we already went over it, that it says much of the modern push for LGBTQI book sets in schools is driven by private grants and non-governmental organizations. So literally AI is contradicting itself here. 100% it was done by non-government. And I'm going to tell you why we already know that in a second. I'm going to get to that in a second, okay? But AI is contradicting itself here. 100% it was done by NGOs to bypass Congress, because it already said up here, it also said specific federal public health grants bypassing Congress. Hold up. It said to bypass Congress. Hold on. Oh shoot. Well, I'm not gonna go too back into the first video because I don't want to. But anyway, literally, decisions were made so that it could bypass the gridlock of Congress. It literally said that above, and that would be in the first video. So if you don't, you have to go back. It'll be in the last like 20 or 30 minutes of the first video. So, yes, it did bypass Congress. And these NGOs were set up for that purpose. I'm going to show you why we know that in a second. You're going to see it's going to click. I'm going to give you the puzzle piece to connect it. And I'm not saying specifically it did. That's how it came out. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that if it is possible, this is how it would be. We're reverse engineering this as we go along. This is how it could have happened. Okay, so AI says no, and GLSEN and USAID funding. So it gives us this number one here. The U.S. Agency for International Development, USAID, manages foreign civilian aid outside the United States because USAID operates strictly internationally. It does not fund domestic K-12 school initiatives like the GLSEN Rainbow Library. Hold up. Just hold on to that for a second. Instead, the Rainbow Library program is funded by private corporate donors and philanthropic foundations such as General Motors. Here we go again. Non-governmental organizations. Well, why does that keep popping up? Request permission from individual school districts or principals to donate these book sets. So NGOs request permission to donate these book sets. The purpose of, can you imagine General Motors if the UAW found out that this happened? I believe there would be a walkout overnight. The UAW is very powerful in this country. And I don't think they're a DNC aligned organization any longer. I think they haven't been for quite some time. But I can just imagine what would happen at the UAW. Because my parents were both auto workers. They were both UAW. My whole life was funded and supported by being auto workers. Okay? So I know about the UAW, and I know what a great organization it is. Because so many things that assisted my mom to be able to support us because, well, anyway, I'm not getting my family dynamics, but be able to support us after my dad was out on disability, and so that we could have a living and a standard of living is because of the UAW. I mean, otherwise, people would have been taken advantage of and would have had very bad working conditions, very bad benefit packages, and different things, so forth and so on. And really, in conjunction with the UAW, General Motors built America. Ford, General Motors, Chrysler, Plymouth. I don't know if that's part of General Motors or not, but all the auto manufacturers built America. Steel, automobiles, coal. That's what built America. And we've lost our way. And really, the unions helped build America. I don't care how much you hate unions, and you can be a corporate giant, and you can say yes or no to all the unions you want, and you can resist unions all you want. And Amazon tried, and now they have a union, and thank God. But I'm going to tell you right now, if it wasn't for unions, America would not be where it is today. Well, I don't want to say today, because we're falling apart because of the shadow government war that's been raging since Obama became president. But at least up to the point of when Obama became president. Okay. The unions built America. Railroad unions, trade unions. I mean, I can't imagine what probably we would have been communists way long before. If it weren't for unions, we would have not be America today. It's just all there is to it. Corporate greed and oligarchies would have took over just like they do in Ukraine, and they would have enslaved everybody. And we'd be begging for money from some other country. UK. We'd be slaves to the UK like we were before the American Revolution again. And there's a very, very, very profitable history that involves American dominance that involves unions. And without them, we would not be America today. So, that being said, I just can't imagine if UAW workers knew about all this intention of funding LGBTQ and all that kind of stuff. I just, the whole country would have come to a halt if this was ever on its face, like directly on its face. I don't mean couched, in a bunch of other words that deluded people. Okay, the purpose, but anyway, AI goes on to say, okay, now NGOs are involved again. It just said no, NGOs didn't, but now it's saying that the Rainbow Library program is funded by NGOs, non-governmental organizations, request permission from individual school districts or principals to donate for free. Well, where do they get the money to publish them? Where do they get the money to pay authors? Where do they get the money to print? Where do they get the money to distribute? Where do they get the money for all these volunteers who call these schools? Where does all that infrastructure come from? Where does all the money that supports all that come from? Here we go. The purpose of ESSA and state control ESSA was not designed to bypass congressional gridlock for social policy. Oh, no. Of course it has to say that. Well, again, you have to take all this with a grain of salt, and you have to let it you have to let it spur questions in your mind. Well, then how? Okay, that's the obvious question here. In fact, ESSA passed with overwhelming bipartisan support in a Republican-controlled Congress, passing 85-12 in the Senate and 359-64 in the House. Well, you know what? I guarantee you that those people thought like I did. They didn't look at it as it was race-based. 100% guarantee. Because both parties wanted to reduce the federal government's footprint in education. See, it was promoted as something very beneficial. It would save the federal government money after the recession, the Great Recession, right? Now, The Great Recession means recession of actual traditional America and procession of the scientific socialist shadow government. That's exactly the intent after the Great Recession. The Great Depression brought in other problems, okay, like the IRS and other instituted governmental agencies. However, the Great Recession was exactly designed to transform America into something else also. History always repeats itself. Apparently, and again, these are all conjecture. This is all conjecture. AI could be telling me total fiction, total lie. It could be leading me down the wrong paths. I'm trying to pull in as many tangents and as many stabilizers as I can to actual recorded historical facts that we already know and have been outed. So just to see if it's legitimate. But this is how we're going. So it wasn't, the purpose wasn't that, but and it was people wanted to save money in the federal government. They wanted to reduce, because this was the time of Ron Paul, Rand Paul's father, and Ron Paul's movement, and Ross Perot before that was very, very popular. Okay, this was the MAGA and America First movement before Trump came along. We had Ross Perot, then we had Ron Paul came into prominence, and I think Ron Paul even maybe was going, people wanted him to run for president if he didn't. I kind of think he did, right? But so did Ross Perot, so did Ron Paul, and then finally Trump comes along and gets elected. Ooh, that caused problems, boy. That caused a lot of problems because Americans stood up against the shadow government of Obama and the 8 years of Obama. So they'd had enough. And that's why they had to react by taking over the elections via Dominion voting systems. But anyway, the shift in power. Oh, it's interesting how AI words things, right? I mean, all it is grepping the World Wide Web. It's just greps, right? It's just crawling it. It's pulling out letters, phrases, and then compiling them, and then using citations. It cites where it gets it from. That's all it is. The shift in power. It doesn't reason. It's not. Don't reify AI. It's really nothing but a giant word processor that can process the whole World Wide Web at once. It's really just a very advanced word processor and search engine. And people are, coding. People who code now, they're trying to use AI and trying to build on it. And of course, there's lots of beneficial things that have been done. But anyway, the shift in power. ESSA stripped away the federal government's ability to dictate specific school turnaround models or teacher evaluation metrics. And that's what I said in the first video. Once they get all of these people in locally onto school boards and as principals, then they dictate who gets hired. And they can decide not to hire conservative, Christian, white Americans any longer. They can decide to hire only liberals and pedophiles and people who want to have sex with the students that they're teaching. Gays and lesbians and trans into the education system. Public school. They decide. And when parents started to stand up against all of this crap, and then they're the ones who are solicited by NGOs, right, for free materials. And I'm going to tell you, in school administration, and as strapped as school budgets can be, that they're going to accept anything free that they can. They're going to accept every handout they can get. And especially if there's money alongside that. Okay, and colleges and universities are the exact same way. I know because I was a graduate assistant for the provost of university, who was over all the finances of a university. So I understand, and part of the doctoral program, she taught some of the classes actually in our doctoral program as well, and so we learned all about higher education finance. But I saw it not only from her class, but because I saw it from the actual sheets, and I was in some of the meetings and on some of the phone calls. I was right there in the office with her, and I overheard everything. And actually, it was by her intention that I overheard all that stuff. That's what she wanted me to learn alongside everything else I was doing. So, I understand that when people offer something to schools and school K-12 or higher education, and you can get a grant to fund a program to attract more students because students bring more dollars through tuition fees and food and money fees and housing and all that kind of stuff, dorm fees and everything they pay, the whole economy of it, of course you're going to accept that. I mean, it's the iron triangle of higher education. And I'm not going to get into deep that, but you can look that phrase up, the iron triangle of higher education, and you can read all about it and find out. Okay, but again, up here, AI said, no, it's not. But the actual answer is in the words and in the response, right? It is, exactly. They're bypassing federal government through NGOs and free supplies and installing the people into place who will say, yes, we will accept those materials because we're aligned with the shadow government. We're aligned with what they're promoting, that white supremacy and color and Mark Mullen from Oklahoma in another video that I just did last night. No, that's not in that video I did last night. But Mark Mullen brought it up in Congress. Bernie Sanders was leading some committee and he read out of the book, and basically in a third grade preschool book, and I'm just going to paraphrase, but it made white people out to be evil because they basically told everybody a lie that who had colored skin, and basically is a foundation for white supremacy doctrine, indoctrination of children in preschool. That's what he read out of this book. It was absolutely astounding. But, and of course, he compared that with a Christian song, Jesus loves me, this I know. For the Bible, all the children, red and yellow, black and white, we are all precious in his sight. And he was like, which would be better? And he asked the panel that. And Bernie Sanders was like, oh, you want to promote that? You think you should promote it? Yeah. He is Bernie Sanders. My God, people, if you ever, you got to get rid of Bernie Sanders. My God, this guy is literally a cancer and has been ever since he entered Congress. He's a cancer. He's a foreign operative. He's like these books, NGO supported, and he's got secret bank accounts because he's supported by foreign governments. That's treason. That's sedition. That's insurrection. That is what insurrection is. Not January 6th was an insurrection. What they are and who they are sitting there, they are the insurrection. Anyway, because they're supporting all of this. They're in league with Obama. He's still in charge of the shadow government in the United States of America. He's still the president. Trump is the president also of the constitutional republic, and they're at war with one another. It's not Trump v. Obama. It's the shadow government versus United States citizens. The shift in power. ESSA. So here's what they did. They everybody wanted to save money in Congress, of course, save money. So they put education on the states. That's totally understandable and rational. Okay. That's why the Department of Education became essentially. Why does it exist then at the federal level? That's why Trump's like, okay, well, we should close it down if the states have, the rights to do their education. and the federal government's no longer in charge, then why? That is an obvious result. However, they did have a purpose. Whew. And it was a shadow government purpose. It's not funny. It's not funny. It's so disturbing that it makes me laugh, though. God, it's so crank. It's so violative of everything that America stands for. But the shift in power. So stripped away the federal government's ability to dictate specific school turnaround models or teacher evaluation metrics, reversing aspects of race to the top. Because race to the top was the Trojan horse. They didn't need the Trojan horse anymore because they'd already got all their people in the right positions, right? They'd already got their army of school board members and principals and the principals of hiring teachers, and changing evaluation models and changing local laws and changing state laws regarding education and elections, and everything was changing. And that's what race to the top was all about. Race to the top was to destroy white America. Race. Every race but white. Right? Really, they don't think white is a race. They think it's the absence of race, and everybody else is race. And that's why whites are racist. Automatically, just because you're white, because you don't have a color to your skin. And that's the delusional belief, spiritual belief, that and philosophy that undergirds the whole shadow government. And the only way they're going to win the war is through the mind of colored people and destroying their minds. This is psyop. It's an assault and battery on your mind, okay? And they're controlling it. If you believe in all that crap, then they're controlling you. It's not you. God didn't make you, because just like Mark Mullen said, we are all precious in His sight. And just like Revelation said, out of every nation, kindred, and tongue, they stood before the Lamb and worshipped Him, worshipped God. Out of every nation, kindred, and tongue, color, creed, background, faith. There are chosen ones. And when I say chosen, I mean, all you have to do is accept the reality of Jesus Christ, that He is the Lord and Savior. He died for your sins, and you're a chosen one. If you accept that, that's because the Holy Spirit has moved on your heart to believe it. And that's how God chooses you. Right? It's because somehow God put you in a position where the gospel could be taught to you. And you accepted, you heard, you listened, and you accepted. And the Holy Spirit moved upon the face of the deep. And He said, let there be light. And there was light in your soul. And you became a new and living creature, a new creation in your soul. Every single person who's a part of the creation, who will be standing before the throne of God, was brought forth out of the tomb and grave of darkness and sin by let there be light. Lazarus, come forth. Let there be light. And there was light. And you walked out into the light by your belief, by acceptance. Anyway, I digress. But the shadow government is satanic. It is 100% satanic. And they're electing people who are non-Christian, non-white. That's who they're selecting to be part of the shadow government, and to put a stranglehold onto, and anybody who, it could be a white person too, as long as they bow down and lick the boots of these DSA liberal Lenin Marxist people, the slave managers like AOC and so many of the Democrats in Congress. I would not say John Fetterman, actually. I think John Fetterman opposed everything. I think he opposes all of it. I think he's smart. I think he realizes the truth. I wish he would just come out and say it, but self-preservation and everything, but they've already stripped me of everything, so I really don't have anything to lose. state autonomy over NGOs by returning authority to the states. And this is why you have blue states the way they are. This is why they act the way they do. This is where all that began. Okay? State autonomy over NGOs. It all began with ESSA. It all began with Race to the Top, the Trojan horse, and the money. And then it created the structure and framework for ESSA. And ESSA became the literal new government, the shadow government. That's where it began. By returning authority to the states, this is why you have blue states. This is why you have Act Blue. This is why you have Fannie Willis and all the AGs. Trish, what's that chick's name in New York? Dang it. Who prosecuted Trump? Trish. And then you have Bragg, Alvin Bragg, and dang, what was his name? What was his name? Trish. Anyway, you'll know who I'm talking about. You all know who I'm talking about. And you have this is why you have Karen Bass. This is why you have Mandami. This is why you have Ilhan Omar. This is why you have Governor Walz. This is why you have Kamala Harris. This is why you have dang, I need to eat. Like, this is why you have the governor of California, okay? All these people exist because of ESSA, right? It divided the people aligned with the shadow government and people aligned with the American Constitutional Republic. The MAGA, the America First. So, state autonomy over NGOs. By returning authority to the states, ESSA gave local state legislatures and remember, they began gerrymandering. They began changing school policies. They began changing election policies. They began changing the judiciary systems. They began, like California, they basically made all criminal acts of fraud and everything else legal. And they outlawed scrutiny. Investigations. Okay, so that's states. ESA gave local state legislatures and elected school boards, we already talked about, and ultimate power to decide who they partner with. Right? This is why Xi Jinping came to visit California, but not the president at the time, who was Donald Trump. This is why Mandami was meeting with leaders from Iran while we're at war with Iran. Right? That's why ESA set up. ESSA created all of this. That's why there's so many Somalians in Minnesota, because that's where Ilhan Omar is. That's where her father is. So everyone who was aligned with the Syed Barr government during the Black Hawk Down episodes, who all went as refugees when that regime collapsed, right? But all those people who committed all those atrocities and were aligned with the scientific socialist government of her father and the president all went to Kenya with USAID money and became refugees, got refugee status. And there was as we said in the other videos, a blind spot where then they all became Minnesotans, transported to Minnesota, Minneapolis, St. Paul. That's their community. And that's all. When you hear the word, everybody saying community and my community, my community, my community, all they want to do is reduce us back to tribalism that existed before the colonists ever came here. That's the AOC narrative, right? All the colonists were evil, so we're going to go back to before those colonists were here, and we're all going to live in separate communities like the Native Americans did, who went around absolutely enslaving and committing the most diabolical murders and rapes of other tribes. They were all communities. The Incas, the Aztecs, all those people were communities. They weren't nations. They were all communities. They were sacrificing children to fake gods that didn't exist. throwing people into volcanoes, cutting their hearts out of them while they're alive, scalping them, raping them. I mean, things that you can't even, you don't hear about because it would destroy the narrative of the kumbaya Emerald City of Oz picture that they want you to have in your head so they can use you and manipulate you like a useful idiot you are. So that's what this state autonomy over, that's what ESSA did. Now you have states instead of a union. And I'm not saying, states shouldn't have autonomy. That's not what I'm saying either. However, what I'm saying is the SSA was a wedge to separate the states from the federal government. This is why you have so many blue states rebelling against the Supreme Court mandates. That's what's going on. That's what came out most recently once Spamberger became governor of California, to undo everything that the prior Republican governor did. That's what I'm here for. And then they tried to gerrymander, and then the Supreme Court came down on them. And then Louisiana tried to gerrymander, and they Supreme Court in violation of the Supreme Court, and then they had to go back to the Supreme Court. Now the Supreme Court's come down and said, no, you can't do that either. But this is exactly why ESA was. This is where it all began. With the ESSA, Every Student Succeeds Act. It's doublespeak. Every student except white. That's what it meant. And we can see that now. Because that's where DEI came from. That's where all the liberal policies and everything came from. That's where all the doctrine of white supremacy came from. The whole revision of history to fit that shadow government narrative came from, and it's all a lie. It's all a lie. Where slavery and all the dialogue about slavery and how the whites are so evil because they enslaved so many, and this new reparations dialogue and everything that's being promoted. That's where it all came from, y'all. This is where it all began. And the NGOs. And we're going to get back to NGOs, okay? The resulting landscape, because states hold this authority now. God, do you see it? Do you see how that dislodged it from Congress and represented? Because the Republicans wouldn't agree to this. Because they knew it was going to destroy. Well, hold on. Hang on, because they agreed to it. They agreed to it at that moment. Let me just say that, okay? And eventually, there was disagreement and gridlock, like I showed in the first video. But in this one instance, to save the federal government money, it was passed. Bipartisan. The resulting landscape, because the states hold this authority, conservative states have used that exact ESSA-backed local control to pass laws restricting LGBTQ materials, while liberal states have used to permit and encourage them. And this is what Obama did. He did not bring hope. He didn't bring hope to America. He brought hope to communism. Okay? He brought communism. It's the same. Again, if you watch the videos about the Bernie Sanders thing, you're going to see exactly it's the same footprint. Operation Restoration. The operation was called Restoration Hope or something like that in Somalia. And that's what Obama's campaign was, hope. But what did he do? He literally did the opposite of that. He divided and conquered conquered almost and brought war to America. Blue state versus red state. While liberal states have used it to permit and encourage LGBTQ, red states have refused it. Now, the only reason that blue states is because they have fraudulent elections. They bypass laws. They pass laws in those legislatures in the blue states to allow these things to exist. Okay, so would you like to look closer at how your specific state laws currently regulate engine? No. So before I'm going to pause here. This is video number 2. There's going to be a third one. We're going to get to the next, because what I'm going to blow your mind with is you got to get back to the NGOs and how how the shadow government bypasses Congress altogether. And this is the beginning of it right here, right? ESSA removed federal oversight. So then the shadow government could work in blue states, and then those blue states could be transported to red states, and the red states would be overcome. This is the plan. All right. This is the plan. Now they're going to try to get back in power at the midterms in 2026, which is when this video is being published and created. Okay. But we're going to pause right here. There's going to be a third video, and it's going to absolutely blow your mind. Okay. So stick with me. If you've watched both of them, it's going to be another hour video. There may be more. I don't know. It depends, because there's a lot of history here. And we gotta uncover and reverse engineer quite a bit of different. We gotta stitch it together and figure it out. Okay, there's a lot of puzzle pieces on the board that we have to put together here. So, but we're doing a good job. Now we've whittled it down to ESA, race to the top. This is where it all began. The infrastructure and NGOs are involved. That's what we know for sure. Okay, so and that's where all the LGBTQIA crap came from. And it started being part of the education system in public schools of the shadow government. Okay, now that's where we're at. That's where we'll begin. We'll start with the next question in the next video.
You've been listening to the Coalmine Canary. The canary has left the building. I repeat, the canary has left the building.